The February wind cut through my coat like it resented my existence. I pressed my back against the service entrance of the Palazzo Nero, watching my breath fog in the amber glow of the security light. Inside, champagne flutes caught chandeliers and laughter, while I counted tips that wouldn't cover my grandmother's medication. The contrast wasn't poetic. It was just cruel. "Elena, table 12 needs clearing." Marco's voice crackled through the kitchen intercom. I pushed through the staff door into warmth that smelled of truffle oil and old money. My uniform was starched to anonymity: black dress, white apron, the kind of invisible that wealthy people preferred their help to be. Table 12 sat in the private alcove, half hidden by silk curtains the color of dried blood. I'd been warned about that section. VIP only. Don't make eye contact. Don't speak unless spoken to. The man at the center wore a suit that probably cost more than my yearly rent. His hair was dark, threaded with silver at the temples, and when he lifted his wine glass I noticed his cufflinks, platinum, understated, lethal in their simplicity. But it was the girl beside him who made everyone nervous. She couldn't have been more than 8, with dark curls and eyes that absorbed everything. She hadn't spoken all evening. Servers whispered she was mute, that something terrible had happened, that her father, this man, had raised entire companies over lesser insults. I approached with the practiced neutrality of someone who'd learned to be furniture. As I reached for an empty plate, the girl's hand shot out. Not aggressive, just sudden. She pointed at me, then at her water glass, then made a series of gestures I recognized with a jolt that nearly made me drop my tray. Sign language, she was signing. Without thinking, my hands moved in response. "You want sparkling instead." Her face transformed, pure sunlight breaking through storm clouds. She signed back rapidly, and I found myself smiling as I replied, my fingers translating what my voice never could in this space. "You understand her." The man's voice was low, textured like smoke over gravel, not a question, an observation that felt like being pinned under a microscope. "Yes, sir, my grandmother is deaf. I grew up signing." He studied me with an intensity that made the air thicken. Around us, the restaurant continued its expensive murmur, but in this alcove, time had stopped. His daughter signed something else, and I translated automatically. She says no one has talked to her properly in 3 weeks, that everyone looks afraid. And you're not afraid, still not a question. I should have been. Every instinct screamed that this man was dangerous in ways that didn't require raised voices or obvious threats. But his daughter's joy was real, and my grandmother's medical bills were real, and fear was a luxury I couldn't afford. "I'm a waitress, sir. I'm invisible by design." Something flickered in his expression, amusement maybe, or recognition. Not anymore. He pulled a card from his jacket, placed it on the table with 2 fingers. Heavy cardstock, embossed text, Dante Caruso, private consultations. No company name, no title, just a phone number. "My daughter will be attending events throughout the city. She needs someone who can communicate for her, someone discreet." He named a figure that made my chest tighten. "Per day. You'd start tomorrow." I looked at the card, at the little girl whose excitement was barely contained, at the man whose cologne was cedar, and something darker I couldn't name. Every romance novel I'd ever read said this was the moment you politely declined, protecting yourself from the beautiful, dangerous stranger. But those novels weren't written by women, whose grandmothers needed specialists that insurance wouldn't cover. "What's the address?" His smile was surgical. "I'll send a car." The car arrived at 6 a.m., black and anonymous, the kind that whispered power without shouting. The driver handed me an envelope, cash advance, 3 days' worth, more money than I'd seen in months. Inside was also a note in precise handwriting: "Wear comfortable shoes, long day ahead." My roommate, Sarah, watched from the kitchenette as I counted the bills for the 3rd time. "This is insane, Lena. You don't know this guy." "I know his daughter needs help." "His daughter has a father who makes grown men flinch." I shoved the cash into my bag, along with the medical invoices I'd been ignoring. Then maybe I'll learn something useful about survival. The car took me to a building in the financial district, all glass and steel geometry. The top 3 floors, the driver mentioned, belonged to Mr. Caruso. Private elevator, retinal scanner, the kind of security that made you realize you were entering a different world entirely. Dante met me in an office that overlooked the city like a chessboard. Floor-to-ceiling windows, minimal furniture, everything arranged for control and efficiency. His daughter, Arya, sat at a small table drawing, but when she saw me, she practically flew across the room, hands moving in excited greeting. "You came back. Papa said you might not." I told him I would. I signed back, then glanced at Dante. She thought I wouldn't show. People often promise her things they don't deliver. He gestured to a chair. "Coffee." "Please." He poured from a French press, and I noticed his hands, scarred knuckles, precise movements. Hands that had built things and broken them. He slid the cup across the desk, and when I lifted it, the warmth was almost offensive after so many cold mornings. "The job is simple on paper," he began. "Arya attends functions with me. Business dinners, cultural events, occasional travel. You translate, keep her comfortable, ensure she feels heard. But you need to understand the complications. The fact that you're not just a businessman." His expression didn't change, but something in the room's temperature dropped. "Careful with assumptions. You asked for discretion in a city where discretion costs extra. You have security that could stock a small army, and people are terrified of disappointing your daughter." I met his gaze. "I'm not assuming, I'm observing." Arya tugged my sleeve, signing a question about whether I liked to draw. I answered her, keeping my attention split between her enthusiasm and her father's assessment of me. "My work exists in gray spaces," Dante said finally. "Legal mostly, sometimes adjacent to legal. I don't explain and you don't ask, but I protect what's mine, and if you're here you fall under that umbrella." He opened a folder, slid it toward me. "Your grandmother's medical records. I had someone review them last night." My blood went cold. "You investigated me." "I protect what's mine," he repeated. "She needs a neurologist. There's a specialist at the university hospital who owes me a favor. Appointment is Monday." I should have been furious. The violation of privacy, the assumption of control. But all I could think about was Nana, who'd raised me after my parents died, who'd taught me sign language through kitchen table lessons and patient repetition, who was fatting in a care facility I could barely afford. "Why would you do this?" "Because my daughter smiled last night for the first time in a month. Because you didn't treat her like she was broken." He stood, walked to the window, hands in his pockets. "Because I pay for value and you have value." Arya showed me her drawing, 2 stick figures holding hands, one tall, one small. Me and her, I realized. In her world, I was already written into the story. "The appointment," I said slowly. "Is that part of my salary or am I accumulating debt?" Dante turned, and for a moment, something almost human crossed his face. "Consider it an investment in making sure you stay focused. Distracted employees make mistakes." It was manipulation dressed as generosity, and we both knew it. But when you're drowning, you don't interrogate the rope. "When do we start?" "Now." He pressed a button on his desk. "My assistant will take you to get proper attire. Tonight is a dinner with city planners. Boring mostly, but important. Arya needs to make an appearance." A woman entered, severe suit, tablet in hand, expression that suggested she'd seen everything and been impressed by none of it. "This way, Miss Rossi." I followed, but at the door I looked back. Dante was watching me with an expression I couldn't decode. It wasn't attraction, exactly. More like he'd found a piece for a puzzle he'd been trying to solve. "Elena," my name sounded different in his voice. "Welcome to the organization." The boutique was the kind where they don't display prices, which meant I couldn't afford to breathe too deeply. Dante's assistant, Sophia, moved through racks with military efficiency, selecting dresses in deep jewel tones. You'll need cocktail attire, business formal, and something for outdoor events. Mr. Caruso prefers his people to project competence. His people. I touched a sapphire dress that felt like water. How many of us are there? Enough, she handed me the dress. Try this, and Alina, a word of advice. I waited. Don't mistake his generosity for kindness. Everything has a purpose. The moment you forget that is the moment you become expendable. The dress fit perfectly because of course it did. When I emerged from the changing room, Sophia nodded approval and added a strand of pearls that probably cost more than my car. Better. You'll need to look like you belong. I'm a translator, not an accessory. In his world, you're both. We returned to the office as afternoon bled into evening. Arya had changed into a velvet dress, her dark curls pinned back with careful clips. When she saw me, she signed her approval enthusiastically. You look like a princess. You look like the princess. I'm just the assistant. Dante emerged from an inner office and I hated that my breath caught. He wore black suit, shirt, tie, and the effect was devastating in its simplicity. Power didn't need color. The car is waiting. He placed a hand on Arya's shoulder, gentle but proprietary, then glanced at me. Stay close tonight. Translate when needed, but also watch. You'll learn faster by observation. The dinner was held in a converted monastery, all vaulted ceilings and modern art attempting to reconcile with ancient stone. Politicians glad-handed developers, lawyers circled like sharks, and through it all, Dante moved with the confidence of someone who knew he owned the room, even if his name wasn't on the deed. Arya stayed at his side, and I stayed at hers, translating her observations. She had a wicked sense of humor for an 8-year-old, nodding which men laughed too loud, and which women smiled without their eyes reaching. I found myself genuinely enjoying her company, forgetting for moments that her father was probably the most dangerous person in the building. During dinner, an older man approached our table. Silver hair, expensive watch, smile that didn't reach his eyes. Dante, I heard you'd brought your daughter tonight. Brave, considering recent tensions. Tensions require two sides with equal power. Dante's voice was pleasant, but every word was a blade. Currently, I see only one. The man's smile tightened. Of course, and who's this? He looked at me. Arya's companion. Dante's hand found the small of my back, just a touch claiming territory without words. Arya signed something quickly, and I translated without thinking. She says you have spinach in your teeth. The man's face went crimson. He excused himself rapidly, and I felt Dante's hand press slightly firmer against my back, approval, or perhaps amusement. You didn't have to translate that, he murmured. She asked me to. Loyal already, interesting. The evening continued in that vein, coded conversations, territorial displays, Arya's observations cutting through pretension with childlike accuracy. By the time we returned to the car, my feet ached and my mind spun with implications I didn't want to examine. Arya fell asleep against my shoulder during the drive. Dante watched us from across the seat, his expression unreadable in the passing streetlights. She trusts you. He said it like an accusation or a revelation. She's easy to trust. And me. I looked at him then, really looked. Dangerous, yes. Controlling, absolutely. But there was something in the way he touched his daughter's hair, adjusting a curl with infinite care, that suggested capability for tenderness existed beneath the armor. Ask me again when I've figured out what you want from me beyond translation. His smile was sharp enough to draw blood. Fair enough. The car stopped outside my building, shabby in comparison to everywhere we'd been. Tomorrow, we visit your grandmother. The specialist needs to do an assessment. You don't have to. I protect what's mine, Alina. We've established this. I wanted to argue that I wasn't his, that this was employment, not ownership. But Arya's weight against my shoulder, the pearls around my neck, the cash in my bag, all of it said I'd already accepted terms I didn't fully understand. "Good night, Mr. Caruso." "Dante," he leaned forward slightly. "If we're going to blur lines, might as well start with names." I left the car with my heart racing, and I didn't look back. I couldn't afford to. Nana's care facility smelled like disinfectant and defeat. I visited 3 times a week, signing stories about my day, pretending her increasing confusion wasn't terrifying. She'd been a seamstress once, her hands creating beauty until the tremors started. Now those hands shook constantly, and words slipped away like water through fingers. When I arrived with Dante and a man he introduced as Dr. Hoffman, Nana was having a good day. Her eyes sharpened when she saw me, hands moving in familiar greeting. "Little bird, you brought strangers." "A doctor, Nana, a good one." She looked at Dante and something passed over her face. Recognition, maybe, or just the paranoia that came with her condition. "I know you." Dante's expression didn't change, but I felt him tense. "We haven't met, Signora." "Not you, your face, your father's face." Her hands trembled as she signed. "Antonio Caruso, bastard, owed my husband money." The room went very still. Dr. Hoffman, oblivious to the sign language conversation, began his examination. But Dante watched Nana with an intensity that made my skin prickle. "Your grandmother knew my father." His voice was carefully neutral. "I don't know, she's confused sometimes." "Not confused." Nana signed sharply. "He sent men, took everything. Your grandfather died of the stress." My stomach dropped. "Nana, that was 40 years ago. This isn't the same man." "Same blood, same poison." Dante caught my wrist gently, stopping my signs. "What is she saying?" I could lie, should lie. But his eyes were on mine, and I'd never been good at deception. "She says your father destroyed her family, that he's the reason my grandfather died." I expected anger or denial. Instead, Dante released my wrist and stepped back. "Dr. Hoffman, give us the room." The doctor left, confused but obedient. Dante sat in the visitor's chair, facing Nana directly. When he spoke, it was with careful respect. "Signora Rossi, my father was many things. Most of them were monstrous. If he hurt your family, I believe you. I can't undo that harm, but I can ensure it doesn't continue." Nana studied him, then turned to me. "Why are you with him?" "His daughter needs me, and he's helping pay for your care." "Blood money." "Just money, Nana. Money that keeps you comfortable." She laughed, bitter and knowing. "You think you're using him, but he's already got his hooks in you, little bird. I've seen this before." Her hands dropped to her lap, exhaustion taking over. "Just be careful which cage you choose." Dr. Hoffman returned with his assessment. "Advanced neurological decline," he explained in careful German-accented English. "Treatable to slow progression, but expensive." He could arrange hospice care, make her comfortable, extend quality of life. He spoke to Dante, not me, and I felt the power dynamic shift like tectonic plates. "Do it," Dante said. "Best care available. Send the bills to my office." "Mr. Caruso, I can't." "You can." He stood, buttoned his jacket. "Your grandmother is correct. My father destroyed lives. I've spent mine trying to build something different." He looked at Nana, then at me. "This isn't charity, it's restitution, and you'll work for it." After they left, I sat with Nana in silence. Her hands found mine, squeezing with what strength remained. "You love him yet?" she signed. "I barely know him." "That's not what I asked." I didn't answer because I couldn't, but my heart was already doing dangerous things, and we both knew it. The next 2 weeks blurred into a rhythm that felt both foreign and addictive. Days were spent with Arya, museum visits, music lessons, careful navigation of a world designed for hearing children. She blossomed under attention, and I found myself genuinely attached to this fierce, funny little girl who saw through everyone's pretense. Evenings were Dante's domain. Business dinners where I translated more than language, reading room temperature, catching undertones, becoming his eyes and ears in ways I didn't fully understand. He never explained his work, but I watched patterns emerge. A word here, a subtle threat there, all delivered with the charm of someone who'd mastered violence without raising his voice. He was teaching me without explicitly teaching me how to read power, how to use silence, how to disappear and reappear strategically. And through it all, he was relentlessly competent in his care, not just for Arya but for me. Fresh coffee appeared when I was tired, car service when I needed to visit Nana, a new laptop when mine died, delivered without comment, acts of service disguised as business necessities. You don't have to do all this, I told him one evening after a particularly long gallery opening. We sat in his car, Arya asleep in the back, city lights painting patterns across his face. Don't I? He loosened his tie, a gesture so intimate in its casualness that I had to look away. You're good at your job. I retain good employees. Is that all this is? Employment? He turned to face me fully, and the air in the car thickened. What do you want it to be, Alina? I wanted to say it was complicated, that power imbalances made everything murky, that I couldn't separate gratitude from attraction. But his cologne, that cedar and darkness, was everywhere, and his eyes on mine felt like a question I wasn't ready to answer. I want to understand the rules. There are no rules. His hand found my jaw, thumb brushing my cheek. There's what I want, what you want, and how those things might align. He leaned closer, close enough that I could count his eyelashes. And I want you to stop pretending you're here just for Arya. Then he pulled back, expression shuddering. But not tonight, not when you look at me like I'm a problem you're trying to solve. The driver pulled up to my building. I left without responding because what could I say? That he was right, that I thought about him constantly, that I was terrified of how easily I was learning to navigate his world. Upstairs, Sarah was waiting with wine and judgment. You look like someone who's about to make a terrible decision. I look like someone who's already made one. He's not your fairy tale Lena. I know, I collapsed on our second-hand couch, but he might be my survival. The shift happened during a dinner in Milan. Dante had business with developers, some deal that would reshape the city's northern district. Arya and I stayed at the villa he kept outside the city, ancient stone and modern luxury, olive groves stretching to the horizon. She was in rare form, signing dramatically about her day, making me laugh until my sides hurt. Dante watched from the doorway, and when Arya finally fell asleep, he gestured for me to join him on the terrace. The night was cool, stars sharp overhead. He poured wine, handed me a glass. You're good with her. She's easy to love. Love, he repeated the word like it was foreign. She's been through 6 companions in 2 years. They all started kind. They all left. Why? Because being kind to my daughter means proximity to me, and proximity to me has consequences. He leaned against the railing, and for a moment he looked tired in a way wealth couldn't fix. Her mother left when Arya was 3, said she couldn't live with what I am. What are you, Dante? He turned and his smile was all edges. The man who ensures certain things happen, or don't happen, depending on who's paying. That's impressively vague. It's strategically vague. He moved closer and I felt my breath catch. But with you, I find myself wanting to be less strategic. Why me? Because you see her first. Not my money, not my reputation. You see Arya and you love her without calculation. His hand found my hip, careful testing. And because when you look at me, you're not afraid. You're assessing, like you're trying to figure out how to survive me. Maybe I am. Smart. His other hand brushed my hair back and I felt electricity down my spine. But survival suggests I'm a threat. Aren't you? To most people, absolutely. He leaned in, lips nearly touching mine. To you, I haven't decided yet. The kiss, when it came, was nothing like I expected. Gentle, questioning, like he was learning me through touch. His hand stayed respectful, but his mouth promised things that made my knees weak. When he pulled back, we were both breathing hard. "This is a mistake," I whispered. "Probably." He kissed my forehead, achingly tender, "but I'm very good at calculated risks." We didn't speak about the kiss, but everything changed anyway. His touches lingered. My awareness of him sharpened. Arya, perceptive as always, started signing knowing comments that made me blush. "Papa looks at you like your treasure," she signed during breakfast. "He looks at everyone like that." "No, just you." "And me," she grinned. "It's nice, like we're a team." But teams had rules, and I was flying blind. Dante gave me more responsibility, attending meetings, taking notes, occasionally offering opinions. I was becoming embedded in his operations, learning the language of power beyond words. Then came the gallery opening. Art and money, Venice's currency. Dante had sponsored an exhibition, contemporary pieces that challenged and seduced. Arya stayed with Sophia for the night, so it was just us, navigating crowds of collectors and critics. I wore black, the dress he'd chosen, pearls he'd provided. I was becoming his aesthetic, I realized, carefully curated to fit his world. "You look uncomfortable," he murmured during a champagne break. "I feel like a doll you've dressed." His eyes darkened. "You think I want you compliant. I think you're very good at making people fit your vision." He pulled me into a quiet corner, hand firm on my waist. "If I wanted compliant, I'd have hired an actress. I want you exactly as you are, sharp, skeptical, stubborn. Don't confuse care with control. Then explain where one ends and the other begins." Before he could answer, a man approached. Late 50s, expensive suit, smile that set my teeth on edge. "Dante, I heard you'd be here, and you've brought a companion. How modern." "Matteo," Dante's voice went cold. "I didn't know you were interested in art." "I'm interested in assets. Speaking of which, I've been reviewing some of your recent acquisitions. The Northern Development deal. It overlaps with territories I've been cultivating." Territory, code for something darker. I felt Dante's hand tighten on my waist. "My territories are well established." "Everything is negotiable." Matteo looked at me, assessing, "even new investments." The threat was subtle but clear. I was a vulnerability, a target, a piece on a board I didn't understand. Dante's jaw tightened, and I knew we needed to leave before this escalated. "We should go," I said quietly. "Arya needs to be picked up soon." Dante nodded, but as we turned, police sirens shattered the evening's elegance. Not regular police, financial officers, the ones who investigated money laundering and organizational crime. They swarmed the gallery, checking IDs, asking questions. "The west exit," Dante murmured. "Follow my lead." We moved through crowds, his hand never leaving mine. Behind us, I heard Matteo's laugh, victorious, deliberate. This wasn't random. This was orchestrated pressure. The car was waiting, engine running. We slipped inside, and the driver pulled away smoothly, like he'd done this 100 times before. "Explain," I demanded as we sped through narrow streets. "Matteo wants my territories. He's using institutions as weapons, forcing me to choose between business and exposure." Dante pulled out his phone, typing rapidly. "I need to move operations, which means moving you." "I'm not leaving Nana." "I'm moving her too. Alpine facility, discreet, best care available. You'll both be safe while I handle this." "Handle this how?" He looked at me, and I saw the truth. This wasn't business negotiation. This was war, and I'd become a casualty by association. "By being better at this game than he is." His hand found mine. "Trust me." "That's a lot to ask." "I know, but Alina." He pulled me closer, and I felt his heartbeat against mine. "You're my weakness now, which makes you his target, and I don't leave my vulnerabilities unprotected." I should have been terrified. Instead, I felt the strangest sense of belonging, like I'd found my place in the storm. The safe house was a chalet buried in alpine snowdrifts, the kind of place that only existed in espionage novels. Stone and timber, roaring fireplaces, and security that would make a military base jealous. Nana arrived by medical transport, Arya with her governess, and me with a suitcase packed by Sophia containing clothes I'd never chosen but somehow fit perfectly. Dante was different here. Less polished, more raw. He wore jeans and sweaters, cooked breakfast with competence that surprised me, played chess with Arya by the fire. I watched him transform from titan to father, and something in my chest cracked open. Nana, in her lucid moments, watched us both. You've decided then, she signed one afternoon while Dante was on a call. Decided what? To stay in the cage, to see if it's a home instead. Is that so terrible? She smiled, sad and knowing. Not terrible, just permanent. Once you choose him, little bird, there's no flying away. That night, Dante found me on the balcony, watching snow fall through moonlight. He draped a blanket over my shoulders, and the gesture was so domestically tender that I wanted to cry. Mateo made a mistake, he said quietly. He threatened you publicly. That gives me leverage. What kind of leverage? The kind that ends with him losing more than territory. He turned me to face him. But I need to know you're with me, not just employed, with me, because after tonight there's no neutral ground. What happens tonight? I call in debts, I restructure operations, I prove that attacking what's mine costs more than any profit. His hands cupped my face. And I ask you to choose, this life with all its complications, or I arrange protection and you walk away clean. I looked into his eyes, dangerous, devoted, desperately hoping I'd stay. Behind us, through the window, I could see Arya showing Nana her drawings. Two worlds somehow becoming one. I need promises, I said finally. Real ones, not acts of service disguised as control. Name them. Arya's safety always comes first. My autonomy isn't negotiable. I'm with you, not owned by you. And whatever you do to Mateo, it doesn't make me complicit in violence. Done, no hesitation. Anything else? Respect, not just for me but for what we could be. If this is power, I want it shared. He kissed me then, deep and claiming, and I felt the decision settle in my bones. This was choosing the storm, but on my terms. Partners, he murmured against my lips. Partners, I pulled back slightly. Now tell me the plan. His smile was pure satisfaction. I thought you'd never ask. The plan was elegant in its brutality. Dante didn't fight Mateo directly. He simply revealed that Mateo's pressure campaign violated agreements with other organizations, breaking the careful balance that kept everyone profitable. He released financial records showing Mateo's overstep, triggering investigations from parties who had more reach and less patience than financial police. Within 48 hours, Mateo was too busy defending his own territory to threaten ours. It's all about showing power without using it, Dante explained as we watched the news coverage from the chalet. Violence is expensive. Information is economical. You destroyed him with paperwork. I destroyed him with consequences. He gambled that I valued discretion over retaliation. He was wrong. Arya climbed into my lap, signing questions about when we'd go home. I translated for Dante, who smiled. Soon, Farfallina, just a few more days. But those days stretched into weeks. Nana's condition stabilized under the hospice care Dante arranged, nurses who signed, doctors who made house calls, comfort that money bought but compassion delivered. Arya thrived in the mountain air, and I found myself settling into rhythms that felt dangerously like family. One evening, Nana asked to speak with Dante privately. I left them in the library, watching through the window as he sat beside her, listening to whatever she signed with careful attention. When he emerged, his expression was complicated. What did she say? I asked. That she forgives my father. That debt passed with him and she won't hold his sins against me. He poured whiskey, drank it in one swallow. And that if I hurt you, she'll haunt me from whatever afterlife she ends up in. She's protective. She's wise. He set down the glass. Alina, there's something I need to tell you about your grandfather. My stomach tightened. What about him? My father didn't just take money. He took collateral, property, businesses, future earnings. Your grandfather couldn't recover, but the debt was satisfied legally, even if it was morally bankrupt. He pulled out a folder, handed it to me. I've been reviewing old contracts. Your family is still owed restitution from my father's estate. Inside were property deeds, account statements, legal documents I didn't fully understand. But the numbers were clear: generational wealth returned. I couldn't finish. Yours always was legally. My father just hid it well. He watched me process. I want you to understand, you're not here because you need me financially. You're here because you choose to be. It was freedom wrapped in revelation. The power to leave, with security and dignity intact. And he'd given it to me willingly, removing the very leverage that kept me dependent. You're either very stupid or very confident, I said finally. Confident, he pulled me close. In you, in us, in whatever we're building. I kissed him then, choosing him not from necessity but from want. And that made all the difference. We returned to the city in March, as winter reluctantly surrendered to spring. Matteo had relocated to the Southern Territories, his influence diminished. Dante's operations were restructuring, less gray market, more legitimate ventures. He was building legacy, he explained, not just profit. For Arya, he said during a board meeting I now attended, I want her to inherit choice, not obligation. I became his official partner both in business and in life. The organization accepted me because Dante made it clear I wasn't decorative, I was strategic. I learned finance, negotiation, the delicate art of power maintenance. And I brought something new: accountability. You can't just threaten people, I told him after one particularly aggressive negotiation. I didn't threaten, I suggested consequences. Dante. He smiled, that devastating combination of charm and danger. Fine, I'll work on my suggestions. Arya was thriving. Her silence felt less like a limitation and more like a choice. She started speech therapy, not to fix her but to give her options. Some days she signed. Some days she spoke, halting but determined. Every word was a victory we celebrated together. Nana moved into an apartment attached to the villa Dante bought in the hills. She had nurses, but mostly she had us. Sunday dinners, garden walks, moments of lucidity where she'd sign her approval of my choices. You were right, I signed one afternoon. This cage became a home. Because you built it that way, she responded. You didn't just accept his world, you changed it. She passed quietly in her sleep that June, holding my hand. Her last sign was simple: be happy, little bird, a silent pillar of support. No pretense, no performance, just presence. Afterward, when everyone had left, Arya signed to me through tears. She loved you so much, and she liked Papa. She told me he was a good man trying to be better. She was right, I signed back, about a lot of things. Recovery took months. I threw myself into work, restructuring Dante's legitimate ventures, creating foundations that would outlive both of us. Education initiatives, community development, programs for deaf children, turning blood money into legacy, one project at a time. You're trying to save my soul, Dante observed one evening, reviewing proposals in his study. I'm trying to give Arya something to be proud of. I marked another document. Your soul is your own responsibility. He laughed, pulling me into his lap. Harsh. Honest, I kissed him softly. Besides, I think your soul is more intact than you pretend. Only because you're here to remind me it exists. We married quietly that fall in a small ceremony on the villa terrace. Arya was our witness, signing her vows alongside ours, a promise to be family, to choose each other, to build something that fear and power couldn't break. No mob spectacle, no political theater, just us and the people who mattered. The dress was simple cream silk that Nana would have loved. The ring was antique, a family piece Dante claimed had belonged to his grandmother. When he slid it onto my finger, his hands shook, the only time I'd ever seen him nervous. "You're sure?" he whispered. "This isn't a business merger, this is permanent." "I know exactly what this is." I touched his face, feeling stubble and warmth. "It's choosing the storm and calling it home." The reception was small. Associates who'd become friends, Arya's teachers, Dr. Hoffman who'd saved Nana those extra months. Sophia made a rare appearance, toasting us with wine and a slight smile. "I told you everything has purpose. Seems yours was him." Later, when the guests had left and Arya was asleep upstairs, Dante and I stood on the terrace where this had all begun to shift. The city spread below us, lights like promises in the darkness. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked quietly. "That night you translated for Arya, the choice that led here." I thought about the cold, about invisibility, about the woman I'd been who counted tips and feared the future. Then I thought about the woman I'd become, strong, certain, loved not for what I provided but for who I was. "Never, not once." I leaned into him. "You gave me visibility, I gave you accountability. We gave Arya a family, that's not regret, that's alchemy." He kissed my temple. 5 years ago I would have called that weakness. And now I call it everything. 3 years later, the organization was almost unrecognizable. Dante had phased out the gray operations entirely, focusing on real estate development, technology ventures, cultural investments. The old guard resisted until they saw the profit margins. Legitimacy, it turned out, was more lucrative than they'd imagined. I ran the foundation full-time, expanding programs across the country. We'd opened 3 schools for deaf children, funded research into communication technology, created job training programs that gave people options beyond service work. Every success felt like honoring Nana's memory. Arya was 11 now, confident and bilingual, fluent in both sign and speech, choosing which language fit each moment. She'd inherited her father's strategic mind and my tendency to question everything. She was going to be formidable. One evening, she found me in the office reviewing budgets. "Can I ask you something?" "Always." "Do you think Papa would have changed without you?" I considered carefully. I think he was already trying. I just gave him a reason to try harder. "Because he loves you. Because he loves us, both of us, and love is the best reason to be better." She hugged me tightly. "I'm glad you weren't afraid of him, everyone else was." I was terrified, I admitted, but sometimes the scariest choices are the right ones. Later, Dante found me watching the sunset from our bedroom. The villa had become home, filled with Arya's art, Nana's photographs, evidence of a life built from impossible beginnings. "Penny for your thoughts," he wrapped arms around me from behind. I was thinking about fate, about cold nights and chance encounters, about how one phone call and a little girl's smile changed everything. "You don't believe in fate." "I believe in choices, and I'm grateful for everyone that led here." I turned in his arms, "Even the terrifying ones." "Especially the terrifying ones," he corrected, kissing me slowly. "Those are the ones worth making." Outside, the city glittered with possibility. Inside, we'd built something that used to seem impossible: family from isolation, light from darkness, home from the cold. Arya called up the stairs, demanding we come see something she'd created. Dante took my hand and we descended together, partners in every sense. I thought of that frozen February night, of invisibility and desperation, of the moment I'd chosen to sign instead of staying silent. That choice had been a door opening, and I'd walked through without knowing where it led. It led here, to warmth, to belonging, to love that was both fierce and gentle, to a man who'd learned to build instead of destroy, to a daughter who felt heard, to a legacy that honored the past while creating a different future. The little bird had found her cage, examined it carefully, and decided it wasn't a cage at all. It was wings. And we flew together. 5 years later. The gallery opening was packed, art collectors, critics, journalists documenting the newest cultural gem in the city's crown. The building itself was a restoration project, an abandoned warehouse transformed into soaring exhibition space. Every brick and beam told a story of decay renewed. I moved through the crowd, no longer invisible, no longer afraid. My role had evolved, board member, philanthropist, the woman who'd convinced the city's most dangerous man to become its most generous benefactor. The press called me the conscience of the Caruso Empire. I called myself simply Alina, and that was power enough. Arya, 16 now and devastating in her confidence, worked the room with practiced ease. She wore pearls, a gift from Dante for her birthday, an echo of the ones I'd worn that first night. She caught my eye and signed across the crowded space, "Papa is schmoozing. Save him before he makes the art critics cry." I found Dante surrounded by 3 journalists, all asking veiled questions about his past. He handled them with charm and deflection, but I could see the tension in his shoulders. "Gentlemen," I interrupted smoothly, "I'm stealing my husband, foundation business." He shot me a grateful look as we escaped to a quieter corner. They wanted me to comment on old allegations. "Did you?" I told them the past is past and invited them to judge me by present actions. He adjusted his tie, still expensive, still devastating, but worn with the ease of someone who no longer needed power to prove his worth. Was that diplomatic enough? Perfect. I straightened his collar, a gesture now familiar and domestic, though you could have mentioned the children's hospital wing we're funding. "I'm saving that for the actual announcement." He pulled me closer, and even after years, the touch still sent electricity through me. "You look beautiful tonight." "You say that every night." "It's true every night." Across the gallery, a new installation caught my eye, a sculpture of a bird in flight, wings spread wide, breaking free from delicate chains that fell like water to the base. The artist's card said it was titled Liberation. "Someone's been paying attention to metaphors," I murmured. Dante followed my gaze and smiled. "Art should mean something, otherwise it's just decoration." A young woman approached hesitantly, early 20s, nervous energy, clutching a portfolio. "Excuse me, Mrs. Caruso. I'm a student at the design school your foundation sponsors. I just wanted to thank you. Without the scholarship, I wouldn't be here." "What's your focus?" I asked. "Accessibility design, technology that helps deaf and hard of hearing people navigate spaces independently." Her eyes shone with passion. "Your daughter spoke at our orientation. She talked about how communication isn't about forcing people to speak, it's about creating multiple languages. That changed everything for me." Arya materialized beside us, having somehow sensed her presence was relevant. She and the student launched into rapid sign language discussion, their hands flying with excitement. Dante and I watched, saying nothing, just witnessing the ripple effects of choices made years ago in cold anonymity. Later, after speeches and champagne, after the crowd thinned and the city lights blazed through floor-to-ceiling windows, the 3 of us stood together looking at the Liberation sculpture. "Do you ever miss it?" Arya signed to her father, "the old way, when you scared everyone and took what you wanted." Dante considered, always honest with her. "Sometimes I miss the simplicity. Fear is efficient, but fear doesn't build this." He gestured at the gallery, at the evidence of transformation surrounding us. "This requires something harder: trust, patience, partnership." "Was it worth it?" she pressed. He looked at me and his expression held everything. Years of choosing change, of learning to love without controlling, of becoming someone his daughter could be proud of. Ask me when I held your mother for the first time, truly held her not as leverage or asset but as partner. Ask me when you signed your first word. Ask me when I watched your mother turn my empire into something that helps instead of harms. He pulled us both close. It wasn't worth it. It was everything. We left together, a family forged from impossible circumstances. The car was comfortable, no longer armor but just transport. The driver, Marco, who'd been there that first night at the Palazzo Nero, smiled in the rearview mirror. "Where to, boss?" Dante glanced at me, always checking, always partnering. "Home." And it was. The villa on the hill, filled with Aria's music and my books and evidence of a life built on choice rather than necessity. Gardens where Nana's flowers still bloomed. Rooms where laughter echoed more than commands. As we drove through the city, I thought about beginnings. About cold nights and invisible women and the moment you decide to be seen, consequences be damned. About dangerous men who learn to be safe, and scared girls who become formidable women, and children who inherit possibility instead of debt. Aria fell asleep against my shoulder, just as she had years ago in another car, another lifetime. Dante's hand found mine, our rings catching streetlight. "No regrets," he murmured, the question now ritual rather than uncertainty. "Only that I didn't find you sooner." I squeezed his hand. "Think of all the trouble we could have caused." "Or prevented." He kissed my knuckles. "I prefer this version, the one where we build instead of destroy. The one where we chose each other." "Every day," he agreed. "Every single day." The city fell away behind us, lights dimming as we climbed toward home. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. There were always challenges. But we'd face them together, with the strength of partnership and the wisdom of second chances. I'd been a waitress once, invisible by design, counting tips and fearing the future. Now I was Elena Caruso, wife, mother, builder of legacies. The transformation wasn't about money or power. It was about being seen, being heard, being chosen. And choosing back. The car pulled through our gates, and I felt the familiar sense of arrival. Not the end of a journey, but the daily return to a place we'd created from nothing but will and love and stubborn hope. Arya stirred, signing sleepily, "Home." "Home," Dante and I echoed together. And somewhere in the darkness, I swear I felt Nana's approval. Her little bird, no longer caged, but soaring on wings she'd built herself.